February 11th, 2012. Just hours before what was supposed to be her comeback performance at a pre-Grammy event in Beverly Hills, Whitney Houston stepped away from the noise, the rehearsals, the pressure, and slipped into her hotel bathroom with her phone. She locked the door. Her hands were trembling. And then, for reasons only she understood, she made a call. Not to her manager, not to her team, not to the Grammys, to someone who had known her long before the fame, long before the headlines, long before she became the voice. What Whitney said in that phone call revealed the truth she had carried for years, a truth she had hidden from the world, a truth she could only share in the quiet hours before stepping once again into the spotlight. Hours later, Whitney Houston would be gone, but the words she spoke in that call, those words would haunt the person on the other end of the line forever. Keep watching, because this final intimate moment may reveal more about Whitney's heart, her fears, her hope, and her destiny than the world ever knew. The Beverly Hilton Hotel was buzzing with life. Celebrities were arriving, rehearsals were running late, cameras flashed, and the building shook with anticipation for the Grammy weekend. But inside Whitney Houston's suite, the atmosphere was different. Quiet, heavy, still. Whitney had been preparing for her performance, the performance everyone expected would mark her triumphant return. She had spent years fighting her battles, and now the world was watching to see if she would rise again. She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But her body was tired, her voice uncertain, and her spirit, though still fighting, felt fragile. Her assistant knocked gently. Whitney, they want you downstairs for sound check. Whitney didn't answer. Instead, she held her phone tightly, staring at the screen as though it held the answer to something she couldn't say out loud. Then she did something no one expected. She dialed. The person on the other end answered on the second ring. Nippy? Whitney closed her eyes at the sound of the nickname, a name only people from her earliest days still used. Hey, Whitney whispered. Her voice was soft, nothing like the powerhouse the world knew. You okay? The person asked gently. Whitney inhaled shakily. I'm trying to be. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, her heart pounding. I have to go on tonight, she said. Everyone's counting on me. They think I'm ready. They think I'm strong. Another deep breath. But I don't know if I am. She wasn't crying, not yet, but her voice trembled with something worse. Doubt, fear, a kind of vulnerability she rarely allowed anyone to hear. They're expecting Whitney Houston, she whispered. Not me. The voice on the other end spoke softly. Then give them you. Whitney let out a broken laugh. I don't know who that is anymore. A silence settled. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Then Whitney said something that made the person on the other end sit up straight. If tonight is my last show, I want someone to know what's in my heart. What she said next would reveal everything she had been carrying, everything she had never said. Whitney's voice softened, as though the weight of the world was pressing against her throat. I'm tired, she said simply. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes. Tired in my soul. The person on the line stayed quiet, letting her speak, something Whitney desperately needed. I spent my whole life trying to be perfect, Whitney continued, trying to hit every note, please every person, carry every expectation. People think being loved by the world is enough, but it's not. It's lonely. A tear finally slipped down her cheek. Sometimes I feel like the world loves my voice more than it loves me. The words were soft, but they cut deep, the kind of confession she could never make publicly. And I'm scared, she whispered. Scared that I can't be who they want me to be anymore. Scared that I've already given the best of me, and there's nothing left. The voice on the line answered gently. Whitney, the best of you isn't your voice, it's your heart. She swallowed hard. I used to believe that, she said. When I was a girl singing in the church, when music felt like prayer, when it felt pure. But fame twisted things. Expectations twisted things. Another tear. I just want peace. Do you understand? Peace. I want to feel God again, the way I used to. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was holy. Whitney's voice grew even softer. If something happens tonight, if something happens this weekend, I need you to know I tried. I tried to keep fighting. I tried to stay strong. I tried to stay Whitney. Her hand shook around the phone. But I'm human. I'm human too. She exhaled, long and trembling. Then she said the words that would haunt the person on the line forever. I just hope the world remembers the girl who loved to sing, not the woman who got lost trying to survive it. The person on the other line broke their silence. Whitney, you are loved, not because you're a star, because you're you. Whitney closed her eyes, letting the words settle into her spirit. I needed to hear that, she whispered. Thank you. But then came the final reveal, the truth that made the call unforgettable. Nobody ever asks how I am, Whitney said. They ask if I'm ready. They ask if I can perform. But nobody asks if I'm okay. Her voice cracked. So I called you because I needed someone to see me, not the singer. Me. Whitney stayed silent for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the hotel ventilation. Then, suddenly, she laughed. A small, gentle laugh that carried both sadness and sincerity. You know, she said, I used to think the stage was the safest place in the world. It still can be, the voice on the line replied. Whitney shook her head, even though they couldn't see her. Not anymore. When I walk on stage now, I feel like I'm stepping into a version of myself the world created, not the one God made. There was pain in her tone, but also clarity. I just miss me, Whitney whispered. Nippy, the voice said tenderly, you're still in there. And tonight, when you sing, sing for yourself, not them. Whitney closed her eyes, let the words sink in, let herself breathe. Then she said something unexpected. If anything happens, promise me you'll remind people of my heart, not my struggles. I promise, the voice replied without hesitation. A knock echoed from the hotel door. Her assistant again. Whitney, they're waiting downstairs. Whitney wiped her face with her palm. All right, I'll be there, she called out. But she didn't move. Instead, she whispered into the phone. Thank you for seeing me one more time. Her voice was soft, trembling, but grateful. I love you, the person said simply. I love you too, Whitney replied. She hung up, and for a moment, a brief, fragile moment, she sat alone in silence. Not as a superstar, not as a legend, not as an icon, but as Whitney, a woman trying to hold herself together for just one more night. A woman who, despite everything, still believed in music, still believed in love, still believed in showing up. She took a deep breath, stood up, and looked at herself in the mirror. The same dark eyes, the same softness, the same spirit. You're still here, she whispered. After ending the call, Whitney walked slowly into the hotel bedroom. The afternoon light streamed through the curtains, painting the room in soft gold. Her assistant had laid out her outfit for the performance, a shimmering gown she once would have worn with pride. Whitney approached it, ran her fingers across the fabric, and whispered, maybe tonight will be different. Not because she felt stronger, not because she felt fully ready, but because, for the first time in a long time, someone had reminded her she was human, allowed to feel, allowed to struggle, allowed to breathe. She sat at the vanity mirror, staring at her reflection. The world saw glamour, beauty, perfection, but Whitney saw traces of everything she'd survived. She touched her cheek and whispered the words her mother used to tell her. You are God's child first. A soft knock came at the door again, this time from a friend who had flown in for the Grammy weekend. Whitney, she called through the door. I'm heading to the lobby. You good? Whitney smiled faintly. I'm okay, she replied, and for the first time in days, she meant it, even if only a little. As the door closed again, Whitney turned back to the mirror. She hummed, a quiet hum, the beginning of a gospel tune she had learned as a girl. The melody filled the room, soft at first, then stronger. She closed her eyes and let the music wash over her, not as a performance, but as a prayer. And as she hummed, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because her problems were gone, not because she was suddenly healed, but because she had allowed herself to be vulnerable. something she had been taught never to show. Whitney stood, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain aside. Outside, the world buzzed with excitement. Celebrities arriving, reporters shouting, fans cheering. She watched them for a moment, the noise muffled by the glass. Then she whispered, "You'll never know me." Not with bitterness, with truth, because the world knew her voice, but only a few ever knew her heart. She placed her hand on the glass, the same hand that had held the phone hours earlier, confessing fears she never allowed anyone to hear. She closed her eyes and said softly, "Thank you for seeing me today." To the person she had called, to herself, to God. A little after 4 p.m., Whitney left her suite. She wrapped a scarf around her shoulders and walked down the hallway quietly, nodding to staff members who greeted her with excitement. She made her way to the hotel pool area, a place she often visited when she needed to escape without actually leaving the building. As she stepped outside, the California sun warmed her face. Music played faintly from the speakers. A few guests lounged around, whispering to each other as they recognized her. Whitney smiled politely, then found a chair at the corner of the pool, away from everyone else. She took a long breath. For a few minutes, she simply sat. No cameras, no pressure, no expectations, just sunlight and water. Then, unexpectedly, a woman approached her. Not a fan, not paparazzi, not hotel staff. A woman who looked nervous just standing there. "Excuse me, Miss Houston?" Whitney looked up gently. "Yes, baby?" The woman swallowed. I I just wanted to say thank you." Whitney tilted her head. "For what?" "For saving my life." Whitney blinked, surprised. The woman continued. "Years ago, I was in a really bad place. I was depressed, ready to give up. And then I heard you sing, 'I love the Lord.' And something in me woke up. I felt like God was talking to me through your voice." Whitney looked deeply moved. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. But your voice kept me alive." Whitney covered her mouth, emotional and humbled. "Baby," Whitney whispered, "thank you for telling me that." "No," the woman insisted. "Thank you. I don't think you understand how many people you've touched." Whitney looked down. She knew she had touched the world, but she rarely felt it. The woman gently touched Whitney's hand. "You're still needed," she whispered. "You're still loved. Don't forget that." Whitney's eyes watered. "Those are the words I needed today," she whispered back. The woman smiled softly and walked away, leaving Whitney speechless. As the sun began to set, Whitney returned to her room. This time, she didn't feel heavy or afraid. She felt reflective. She sat on the edge of the bed and closed her eyes. Memories washed over her. Her first performance at age 5, her church choir days, her mother's lessons, her biggest stages, her deepest struggles. All of it. Then she heard her own voice in her mind, not singing, but speaking. "I just want peace." Peace. It was the word she had held on to her entire life. She reached into her purse and found the folded note her mother had given her years ago, the same one she still carried. "Baby, don't let the world tell you who you are. Tell yourself who you are." She pressed the note to her chest. And in that moment, alone in the quiet of her hotel room, Whitney whispered, "I know who I am." Not the headlines, not the pressure, not the legend. Just Whitney, a soul longing for light. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Her assistant again. "Whitney, you coming down soon?" "Yes," Whitney said gently. "In a minute." When she stood up, she looked toward the ceiling and whispered, "Lord, thank you for today, for the call, for the honesty, for the unexpected encounter, for every reminder that she was more than what the world demanded." She stepped toward the door, not knowing that it would be the last time she'd ever walk through it. But in those final moments, Whitney Houston wasn't afraid. She wasn't doubting herself. She wasn't carrying the world. She was simply Whitney, a woman who had finally been seen, heard, and understood. And for the first time in a long time, she felt peace.